Hello, my today's guest is Associate Professor of the First Nations University of Canada, uh, Salman Ratt. Uh, Good morning, Sol. How are you?
Hmm, I'm pretty good. How about you?
Good, good. I I really appreciate you joined. You had time to join this meeting. I know that end of the semester is always crazy. Um, Traditionally, at the beginning of our discussions, I introduce my guest and I prepared some slides. I will share my screen and show them, and then hopefully we can continue.
All right.
So, Salman Ratt, Associate Professor of the First Nations University of Canada. What I've learned about Sol from my internet search. Salman Ratt was born in 1953 near Stanley Mission. This is about 320 kilometers north of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. At the age of 6, Solomon was taken to the Prince Albert Indian Residential School. And for the next 10 years, he spent 10 months of every year at the school. Despite of these years of the residential school, Solomon kept his native language alive. And years after the residential school, Solomon started teaching himself his native language, Cree. He's been working at the First Nations University of Canada for more than 30 years. Over these years, Solomon authored several books for Cree learners, teachers, and students. Now, Solomon is a nationally recognized scholar, and recently Solomon Ratt was awarded by the Saskatchewan Order of Merit. Solomon was chosen for the outstanding contributions he's made for the promotion and preservation of the Cree language in Saskatchewan and across Canada.
I was waiting for the slideshow to start.
Yeah.
Were you gonna show the slideshow?
Oh, I will show that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I showed that, but probably you didn't see that. But on the video, you will
go
see that.
from screen to screen. Yeah, I didn't go
Yeah.
from screen to screen, so that's what I was looking at.
Yeah, you will see on the video. So
Okay.
you didn't
All
see
right, that's
that.
good.
Yeah, but during our discussions, during our talk, I will show some more pictures. And first, I would like to ask you if I'm missing anything.
If I what?
If I'm missing anything about the information, or would you
Oh
like
no,
to add something?
it looks quite complete. So I think it's okay.
Yeah, this is what I found from my brief search. And I will start a little bit, maybe an unusual question. I'm very glad we've been Facebook friends for a while. And I like to be honest, I enjoy going over your website. And Sol is coming back, I hope, shortly. Yeah. So I like to go over your website, and most of that I enjoy. I like the pictures that you post on the website. And to be honest, it's I would say one of the most interesting websites that my friends have. What I noticed, most of your pictures are travel pictures. And what is it travel for you? Is it just a hobby or passion, or maybe it has more kind of philosophical reason? Maybe it's running away from the routine of the life. what's it travel for you?
Well, it's a form of escape. It's a form of escape, okay? Because when I was in the residential school, we'd be out in recess and we'd be playing out in the yard. And I used to see my principal's car that's smacked with tourist stickers, right? Yellowstone National Park, Grand Canyon National Park, and all sorts of things, Victoria, Vancouver Island, Victoria, all these things that we said, California, San Francisco. And here I am, little boy standing around in the schoolyard, at the residential school. When I grow up, I'm going to go there.
Good.
Here have I traveled.
Yeah, that's good. So that's approximately what I was thinking. Today, many people know Solomon Ratt, Professor Solomon, and for most of the people, Solomon Ratt is a teacher, but not just a teacher teaching in school, in the classroom. It's a teacher in global understanding, a person teaching Cree, writing books for Cree learners. It looks like this is not just your profession, it's your mission. How did you get that understanding that this is your mission? Was that your own decision or someone's advice? How did you come in this to this mission?
By accident, actually. You could call me the accidental teacher. I was a student at First Nations University. At that time, it was SIFC, Saskatchewan Order of Merit College. When Jean Ogimasas called me into her office and asked me if I could take over for a teacher, for a professor who was sick. And this was in 1984. And so in 1984, I finished off that teacher's class for that. So I was sessional for 84 and 85. And the teacher never came back. So I sort of got stuck teaching. So I had to teach and also go to class at the same time. And I was doing my degree as I was teaching. And in 1986, I came on full time. And I came on full time as a professor, as an instructor at that time. And I've been teaching ever since. And like I say, I came to it by accident. I was in journalism school, hoping to be a journalist. I never got to be a journalist. But you know, education has been a big part of my life. And like all life, from the time we were born to the time we leave, is education. That's what I look at it. And this is a traditional view of education, traditional Cree way of looking at things.
I know you are, as I mentioned, you are a residential school survivor, and I have known many people from residential school, even in my own native country in Canada. And I had some students in my classes, aged students. Mostly, they don't like to talk about residential school experience. And it's understandable. I would want to ask you about your residential school experience as a student. So now you've been teaching yourself for many years, decades. As a professor, Solomon Ratt, how would you evaluate the educational component of residential school? How was it as an educational institution? Was it effective, or did they, at least for themselves, did they think that they want to educate people, or how would you evaluate, again, effectiveness of residential schools as educational institution?
My residential school experience, I'd like to say that my schooling got in the way of my education. Because in the traditional Cree way of teaching, you learned everything from the time you were born to the time you leave, as I said earlier. But what kind of things am I learning as a child? Okay, so I was with my parents traveling up and down Churchill River when I was a child before going to residential school. And every winter, my parents would tell me our traditional stories. These were our classrooms. These traditional stories were our classrooms. The subjects covered everything from child rearing to being part of the community. And so that was broken when I got to the residential school. I don't know if I could share a screen. So when I went to a residential school, my teachers and supervisors looked at me as an empty vessel to be filled up with new information. They did not acknowledge my previous education of the schools. I'll share something right here to explain that. You have to enable my my participation.
Yeah, I'll do that right away.
Yeah. So that's the thing,
Yes,
you know.
yes,
Like,
go ahead, please. I think you can do that now.
can I do it now?
Yeah, I think you can share your.
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah, I see.
For years, the education system, I'll make it bigger. For years, the education system has devalued the First Nations child's culture as he or she enters the classroom. The First Nations child enters a classroom that primarily reflect the knowledge and values of economically and culturally dominant groups. They validate and reinforce what Bordeaux called the cultural capital students from such groups bring from home. This is from Sonia Nieto. The First Nations child is asked to abandon his or her previous learning or his or her cultural capital as she enters the school. What cultural capital does a First Nations child bring into their classroom? The graphic below tries to show the cultural capital the First Nations child brings into the classroom and what happens when she begins her schooling. And we can see here, we have the child, Awasis, and as he grows up with her parents or his parents, we have activities that teach him things like harvesting plants, medicines, and we have the hunting and fishing, and we have learning coming from there during growing up. And then we have gatherings, so we have gatherings like powwows, and up north it'll be square dancing and treaty days competitions. That was fun. And we have stories, mainly stories in the wintertime, all the time. First fall of snow, we have, this is all what the child brings into the classroom before going to school. And then when he goes to school, all that above is ignored, it's broken to be filled with history, literature, science, and math. Everything else above is empty, is ignored in the education. And that's how I look at the education system in my residential school experience. And we have this. What does it, so here's a child right here. And we have harvesting, we have wild rice, medicine, berries, firewood, birch syrup. All these activities, I remember all these activities when I was a child before going to school. And we learned how to get along. We learned how to help each other. We learned that my contribution was valued in this gathering. And then we have at the Yokewana, the traditional stories. What is in that on these traditional stories? We have lessons on conservation, philosophy itself, history, virtues, family, and humor, of course, all the time. Okay, in some of the stories, we went. There's some seals and walruses appearing in some of our stories, and I'm on the prairies. Where the hell are the seals and the walruses on the prairies, right? But we have a lot of Cree in James Bay, where there's a walruses and whales and seals and everything like that. So that they tell the stories down the river along the way, up the river, I should say, and we get the stories here because we've been here for years in northern Saskatchewan for years. And before, we didn't move east from the James Bay area, but we did have trade units all the time, and we shared our stories that way. And then we have gatherings, powwows, sweats, games, and competitions, all sorts of competitions. We have stick games. We have competitions for telling stories. Who can tell the tallest tale, right? We call them liar stories. We have stories like that to try to tell great sacred stories, as in, okay, liar story. One day, Arzu and I went golfing, and so I hit the ball up into the air, and it went up into the air, and the ball hit a grouse on the head, knocking it over. And from there, the ball bounced across that prairie and coming up on a couple of rabbits, bouncing on their heads, and rabbits keeled over. And the ball bounced up into the air and toward the lake and bounced on 3 ducks' heads. And from the last duck's head, the ball bounced up way up into the air and fell right into the hole. And I had a hole in one. That's an example of a liar story. That kind of stuff would be told in these competitions. And whoever tell the best liar story won that competition. These are the things of communal activity that are no longer told. And I've seen this. I've seen these competitions, and I just love these stories. Then we have the hunting, all sorts of things. We have hunting, trapping, fishing, and crafts. A lot of people don't realize there's a lot of skills involved in hunting. You have to be able to know how to track. You have to be able to know what you're tracking. And also about trapping, you have to know what kind of traps to use out there. And fishing, what kind of fishing are you doing? Are you net fishing? Are you casting away? That kind of stuff. And you have to know the fishes, of course, the kind of types of fishes. All this knowledge is in there. And all this knowledge is what I learned before going to school. After going to school, once a child enters the residential school, all the above previous ways of knowing are ignored, devalued, and new foreign systems are introduced as if the child is an empty vessel to be filled with science, math, literature, history.
Okay, so what I see, I love the diagrams. As a mathematician, for me, it's easier to understand when I see the diagrams, when everything is pictured out. So this, even I try, and I think I can kind of understand what was missing in residential schools. But I also realize that in today's schools, those components are missing. And not only for Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, they also have maybe not specifically hunting experience, but many other experience from many other cultures. It looks like our modern teachings philosophy is missing that component. If you were, a teacher that in your class, you have Indigenous people, non-Indigenous people, and you are a school teacher, what model of teaching would you propose that all students, Indigenous, non-Indigenous students, they all would be benefited? What model, what do you say, what model we have to propose to society, our days?
Well, the big thing today is, everybody jumps on the bandwagon every now and then throughout history, being cynical here, but this is the truth of it. It's basically what is popular today is land-based education, which is wonderful. You take the children out into the land base and into the land and teach them a few things. Okay, it's great. The only drawback in the whole thing is everything is done in English. Everything is done in English. And sure, they'll learn how to do these things in using the English. And I've asked a few colleagues who are teaching land-based education, why don't you do that in Cree? And they say, the students wouldn't understand anyway. But they would. Eventually, they'd know what's going on. Because okay, like my model shows, like children are smart. They know how to take in information. If I'm showing you how to do something with using my hands as I'm talking. You see what I'm doing. Imusakin a man means Imusakin a man means here's what Diane. You know, you see what I'm doing, and the students see that. So you don't really have to depend on English to teach these things. Musakin a man. Here's what Diane means. You know, children will pick up because you've got a lot of repetition going on here. And that's the way it is when we come into the world. A lot of people don't realize, you know, like you're a parent, I'm a parent. And I didn't tell my children how to dress in one day, and only once. That was done repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly throughout their growing up. So as they grew up, they got to understand more and more and more. And that's what we have to do with land-based education. Go back to the language. The students may not know what you're saying. Musakina means that aswata muskimutik. Musakina. When you hear that over and over again, they'll understand. Okay, that is what's going on. The guy's picking berries and putting them in a basket. Musakina. Okay. And stuff. So that's just basically what it needs to be done with land-based education. We need to go back to the land, but that also means we need to go back to the language. And therefore, the land-based education would be that much more effective in recapturing the culture. That's a model I'd love to see followed in these land-based education sites. Otherwise, it's just going to go down the drain. I'm going to see it's not that effective, isn't it? Let's find out something new, and something new is invented. And right away, it sounds really good. So everybody jumps on that bandwagon for a few years. And a few years later, that didn't work really well, did it? You know, go on to the other thing. And this is basically, I know it sounds cynical, but I've been teaching for 37 years. And I've seen these trends. What becomes popular for a while gets ignored after a while. Something new comes in, and that becomes popular. That gets ignored after a while, because, you know, so on and so forth.
Yeah, you kind of brought me to my next question that I had prepared before. A couple of years ago, you know that my colleagues, Willie Ermine, Ida Swan, and I published the Cree Dictionary of Mathematical Words, and you have kindly edited that book. You helped us a lot. You composed some words, some terms, mathematical terms, and we had some discussions, I remember, and in our team we had those type of discussions. When we talk about mathematical terms, it looks like in different dialects of Cree, sometimes the same word has a little bit different meanings. Word is the same, but the meanings are slightly different. And I know I'm kind of familiar with that because I have the same situation with my own native language, Azeri. It belongs to Turkish languages family, and sometimes we use the same word but in different meanings. Like in Azerbaijan, in Turkey, in Uzbekistan, you use the same word, but they have the different meanings. For mathematics, science terminology, we kind of, people made many years ago, some kind of convention that regarding those terminology, that at least the terminology would be common in all those languages. What do you think? Would it be possible, and does it make sense for scholars like yourself, speaking different dialects of Cree, to get together and to develop some common terminologies for mathematics, for science disciplines? I think that would be helpful if we to use them in to develop the programs that would be entirely, let's say, in Cree. So if we would have a Cree school and all subjects would be taught in Cree, not in English, not in other languages, in Cree. But for that, again, we need those terminologies. on different disciplines. What do you think about that? I mean, is that good, or we don't need that at all?
It's a good idea, basically because Cree is a living language. Okay, as a living language, we bring in new words to use, just like computer. Literally meaning a wondrous tool. And that's one of the terms that is becoming more acceptable in all across Cree, and because it's short, it's the shortest we could get. You know, but the thing is, we have to bring in fluent speakers. Now, here's the thing: not just fluent speakers of the language of Cree, but also fluent speakers of English. To be a good translator, you have to be fluent in both languages you're working with. Because that way, if you're looking for a word for Cree, if you're looking for a word, an English word in Cree that doesn't fit, you have to look for synonyms in English. And maybe that synonym in English will be more translatable into Cree. So one of the handiest books, one of the handiest things I have is thesaurus, because Cree is not, English is not my first language. So I run into problems with that stuff. I can go back, let's go to chat here. We love to talk about nature, right?
Yeah.
Well, we really don't have a word in Cree for that. Like, Cree people respect nature, but what do we do? We go to the nearest thing we have. Okay, you were talking about the word can mean two different things or lots of different things. They go, so this means wilderness in the wilderness area. So that's what worked for nature, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the natural world, right? So that's pretty neat. So we have to make up these things, and then we run into problems like, hey, how do we say scanner in Cree? How do we say scanner in Cree? And then we got into run into somebody that says, we never had scanners in the old days, so we don't have a word for that. That attitude actually contributes to the death of our languages when people think that way. We never had that word in the old days. Well, we are a living language. Let's make up a word for this thing, because it's a reality. Because in reality, we never had a word for airplane. But people made up a word for airplane in Cree. We never had a word for car. We never had cars in the old days. You know, bad attitude. But people made up a word for cars. We never had trains, that we had made up a word for trains. And that's the thing. We got to get away from this attitude of being a traditionalist. We never had that in the old days. You know, that kind of stuff, that kind of attitude, does more harm than anything. And we're just really wild. So we have to make up words for that.
Yeah, you know, it's from my, this is not my area. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, but I know that from my knowledge, sometimes those words that compose words, they give better idea about the subject. For example, like a computer, right? Computer, means something, computing. It's very simple operation. And it's now our days, maybe at the beginning that was exactly a computer, but now it's more than just computing. And in Turkish, they translate computer as bilgisayar, which means knowledge, something computing knowledge or preserving knowledge. And that word actually represents the computer better than in English. So sometimes those composed words can represent the subject even better than in original. So I love that idea. But again, I think probably because the different people can compose different words, right? So
Oh, yeah.
maybe the indigenous organizations, or what do you think the government would initiate that process, the developing some common terminologies for not only for Cree, I mean for Cree, for Dene, for other languages.
Yeah, we need to have an organization that does that, that brings in language speakers to have a new word coinage gathering conference, basically. And we used to do that in the old days, back in the 1980s. We used to have people gathering together to try to create new words. And there's always differences in pronunciation, of course. And and there's always sometimes that the one word could mean the same thing, two different things, like scanner and camera can have the same thing. That word actually means something that you take an image of, you use it for an image. There we go. And so that's that kind of stuff. And so we have to agree with, we have to agree, like that group of people have to agree on certain terms. Now, the other problem we run into today is that a lot of people don't write Cree. They don't know how to write Cree. We run into the attitude, Cree was never a written language. Turkish never was a written language. English was never a written language. Russian was never a written language. Chinese was never a written language. None of the languages of the world were ever written languages to begin with. But Turkish, Chinese, English have a long history of literacy development, of writing the language. And this is where we are today. Cree is starting to get into writing. And a lot of people need to learn how to write the Cree language, it's just like a lot of people just resist writing because they say Cree never was a written language. I don't have to learn to write it. Well, look at this. This is my book. It's my Cree my Cree words book. Look, it's falling apart. The other one is worse. It's falling apart.
By the way, I use those books too when I worked on the dictionary, and it happened the same to my copy as well.
I've been teaching for 37 years, teaching Cree, and I still have to look up words that are in the dictionary and how to spell them. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that literacy is something you need to work on. You don't come out of the cradle. You don't come out of the cradle and begin to read and write right away.
Yeah.
So, in any language, nobody does that. Okay. Andy, that's a good picture. That one's not a picture.
Yeah. So again, you kind of make a connection yourself. I had prepared the questions, to be honest, but you're giving me some tips. It looks like I didn't share that with you, but somehow you're giving me the connection to the next question. Because of this pandemics, we all moved our teaching mostly to online format. We use the internet, Zoom, and different technologies. But I know that you started that even before, and you use new technologies for teaching Cree. You use Facebook, you make videos, and etc. To me, for my own teaching, I can see that online teaching is my online teaching efficiency. It looks like is higher than my classroom teaching efficiency. Some our colleagues agree, some don't. What do you think as a person who's using new technologies in your teaching? What do you think, what would happen to our teaching modes after, I hope one day this pandemic will be over? Will we keep using the same format, or it will change?
I think we will adopt. When we go back to face-to-face teaching, we will adapt our teaching methods to bring in more technology. You see, I went to Tucson in 2001, 2002 to take some classes for my PhD. And Tucson is a type 1 research institution. University of Arizona is a type 1 research institution. And they get a lot of funding to buy new equipment. And I was amazed at the equipment they had. When we made our class presentations, we could go ahead and put our charts on a screen, and the screen put the charts up, and that scanner put the charts up behind us so everybody could see it. And that's how these things work. And I was amazed like that we could do this. You know, we don't have to do anything. We just put the thing on top, and you could see it behind you. And I was amazed. I have never seen that anywhere else, especially at our university. I didn't see that, and I missed that. But now with Zoom, I could do that, right? We could share screens on Zoom. You know, so if you have your materials ready, then we could have that, and there we go, like that, right away. Zoom has that capabilities. We could do that face to face, of course, you know, also, but it's more handy to be able to do this through Zoom. And so we have this three ways of knowing. And this is basically, I had developed this back in 2001 for my class in Arizona, at the University of Arizona. And I was able to place this on that scanner, and they just showed up on there. You know, we didn't have to rely on those projector things where you put a USB in there and have it scanned on there. We didn't have to do that. So we have these three ways of knowing. And we have four ways: emotional, spiritual, and physical, and psychological. Okay, if you follow the little thing on physical, each of these 4 units could have their own curriculum. Let's just look at physical skills here, connected to education, arts and crafts, nature's bounty, and storytelling. Each of these 4 could have their own curriculum. Let's go to nature's bounty. What do we have with nature's bounty? We have the connection there to the next 4. In nature's bounty, we could talk about hunting, fishing, gathering, and trapping. Each of these 4 units could have their own materials and their own curriculum. And then, so let's look at gathering. No, that's not what it is. Okay, fishing. Okay, that's the connection to the next line. It's fishing. What kind of fishing is there? There's fishing with nets, types of fish, traditional fishing, angling, and preparing fish. All these things could have their own materials developed. And so, you know, like I showed this to my classmates in Tucson back in 2001, and using the technologies they had, and they were all, wow, is that ever great? You know, and so that's why I think it's just so neat to be able to teach through Zoom and be able to attach, you know, be able to resort to your previous documents and share them with the students. And students, if you put this on UR courses, students are able to access that for themselves on UR courses, and it saves us.
Yeah,
photocopying stuff for them, right?
that's
the part of teaching I did not like, is making photocopies for everybody. But UR courses takes care of that.
So I want to make kind of like a compliment to you, not about your teaching. I mean, it's you're a nationally recognized educator. You don't need that, but we've been working together for years, and I know you as very positive person. And every time after communicating with you, my feeling is that I receive some, very positive energy. And it's so we're socializing and communicating as a human being, and we have the way of communication. But because of the pandemics, we kind of like separated, but not physically. I mean, physically, yes, but still we can communicate. And sometimes I feel I socialize even better, more intensively with my friends, with my relatives, with my colleagues from different countries very easily. I can join the conferences and etc. But at the same time, again, it looks like physically now, at least we have to stay two meters away from each other, right? And I remember when this pandemic started, I remember a fiction of Isaac Asimov, and you know that he's the author of many fictions. It was written in 90s, I think almost 70 years ago or something. I don't remember exactly the year. He wrote about a planet. In that planet, that was about the size of the year, but size of the Earth, but they had much less people living in the planet, maybe tens of thousands, like on Earth. And they did not like to communicate, to stay even in one room. At that time, he wrote about this type of communicating. They didn't know the Zoom or whatever, but he mentioned about this type of technologies. And those people, not just physically, they didn't have that chance to get together, to gather together. So they didn't even like it. For them, it was something bad, not healthy to stay together. So it looks like this pandemic a little bit changed us. What do you think? It's these type of pandemics, this type of things that happens, can they modify human being, like our psychology, our behavior? Will we stay the same people after this pandemic, or will we change forever?
I think it will change a lot of people. I think it has changed a lot of people with our social interaction. And it is the same way as it was in our schooling. When we started schooling, everybody, not just residential school survivors, but when we started to learn how to socialize out there with other people. It's not just family that are around us, right? Anymore. When we start going to school, we have to actually socialize with other people. And so here we are, like this is pre-pandemic times. I got invited to a party one time, and during Christmas time, and one of my colleagues invited me to her home to go party, and for a Christmas gathering, eat some stuff. And I went to the gathering, and sat in the corner, played with her cat most of the time. Didn't socialize with anybody. And she says, afterwards, the next day, the next time I saw her after the party, I'm surprised at you. I said, why? Because I see you in the classroom. You're so lively. You're so funny. You're so good with people around in the classroom. But when you came to my party, you just sat with my cat. And I said, well, I'm great when I'm center of attention, like I am in the classroom. But put me in together with people, I really withdraw. And this is basically what's going to be happening here. Like it's going to be taking a little while. If we start gathering together, it's going to take a little while to get used to being social again, I think, because most of us are in isolation. I am. I rarely see anybody except when I go grocery shopping, and once in a while I'll go walking around with a friend, and that's just the extent of my socialization for the past 2 years. And then I went to the Saskatchewan Order of Merit ceremony. And there was lots of people there. You could get through it, you could get through it, you could get through this, you could get through it. It was really, really intense, but I got through it. It was really hard, and we started to stay away from each other like that, and we had to wear a mask, of course, so the ways of socializing is going to change because of pandemic, and it's understandable because you know, like, I don't socialize with anybody right now.
That's good. Yeah, it's I think it's we started talking about the future now, so it's already is positive things that if we I mean, it's at a certain age, we think about the future. We make kind of like some maybe predictions, some plans. So it's very positive, I think, for our days. And I wouldn't like to say we're finishing. I think I hope we can in future we can continue our conversation, at least in post-pandemic time. We can come back and check how Professor Ratt was correct, how your predictions will work. So will they be if they were correct or no? So let's talk about that after this pandemic gets over, and we will come back.
Good to see. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Okay.
Saul. And I enjoyed our as always. I love to communicate with you.
I enjoyed it. And like you say, you know, like this pandemic has changed our ways of socializing, and I do a lot more socializing on Facebook. People think I'm just really wonderful and to be around with, you know, but I'm just really shy when I'm out in public with people. So, but I really am outgoing. It seems like I'm outgoing on Facebook, you know.
Yeah.
For you all, ha ha ha.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I will keep checking your Facebook because really it was very helpful. I'm sure not only for me, these pandemic times, and now it's a little bit better, but just a year ago, it was very hard time. And I was just enjoying, and it was giving me, you know, it was energizing me. And not just me, I can say that from the comments. So I will, it's not commercial ad, but go and check Saul's Facebook. You will really,
Thank you.
you will be
You may find some
positively. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Saul.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave now. Thank you.
Bye.
It was a joy.